Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning, Yehuda.
Good morning.
Good morning. Oh,
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, David.
we were learning about the prohibition of benefiting from the items that are set aside for a mitzvah. And the source of them was the prohibition of benefiting from the sukkah. So in there's a sefer called Sheva Chamoyadim. He is called a malakate. He gathers makes it summarizes what he gets from all the other svarim, many of the other books, and he writes here about the prohibition on benefiting from the walls of the sukkah. He says the atzei hasukkah, the walls of the sukkah, um, and the schach and the wood of the schach are all prohibited to benefit until after Simchas Torah. They're hukzu lemitzvah. They're set aside for the mitzvah. Even to take from them a splinter, like a toothpick, to use for your teeth is prohibited. And even if naflu, if it fell, let's say a little piece fell off of the wood, you're not allowed to benefit from it. And it doesn't help if you make some type of a condition. Now, if Simchas Torah falls on a Friday, then even on Shabbos after Simchas Torah is also part of that prohibition, because Yontiv leads right into Shabbos. You'll have the same problem. You can't benefit even on Shabbos afterwards because it's basically set aside for the mitzvah until after Yontiv. Now, you're allowed to benefit from them in a way that you don't take away the kedushas hasukkah. You're not taking away the holiness from it. For example, to put on it chafetzav, to put on the walls. Let's say you're sticking some type of you're hanging something on it, or to smell it. If it's, let's say, a nice smell wood, you'd be allowed to smell the sukkah, because you're not taking away the kedusha sukkah, the holiness of the sukkah. And he talks also about the decorations that people hang in the sukkah. You're not allowed to benefit. You're not allowed to take them and eat them, even if they fell. Let's say people hang on their sukkah. Let's say I don't know. People hang fruits and stuff. So since it's prohibited to eat, it's also prohibited to move around. They're considered muktzah, and at least on Shabbos and Yantiv, not on a Chol Hamoed, but at least Shabbos and Yantiv, they'll be prohibited to move around. Now, if you make a condition before you enter before Yantiv comes in, before Yantiv kicks in, he says, I am not setting this aside for the mitzvah to be prohibited, from using it. Regarding the decorations, if he makes a condition and he says, I'm planning on taking advantage of these decorations to use. So for the decorations, it works. It doesn't work for the walls of the sukkah. Now, even after Yontiv, when you take down the sukkah, you shouldn't walk on the boards of the schach, and don't use them for something that's inappropriate. Basically, even though the law of benefiting from them doesn't apply anymore, but there would be a prohibition of degrading something that was used for a mitzvah. So that's regarding regarding the sukkah itself, and it says similar to the sukkah is the daled minim, and I believe it talks about it here, and I don't see it right now. The law about smelling, what our Gemara talked about, and that was smelling the. I believe I've seen it here. about smelling the esrog and smelling the hadassim. But he does talk about the lefty. That's another thing that I did want to bring, and that is that a lefty takes the lulav in the left hand. The righty takes the lulav in the right hand, because according to halacha, a lefty, his left hand is considered the more honorable hand, the more respectable hand. So therefore, the lefty would use his left hand to shake the lulav. Let's see. Yeah, I don't see the law about smelling it here. But anyway, okay, we'll have to look in the actual Shulchan Aruch for that. Let's see, we are holding on Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Beis, and we were learning some few statements of Rabbah, and where Rava seems to argue on a number of his statements, um, issues with holding the lulav, where to hold it, if there's a chatzitza, if it's considered holding it properly, and holding it with something else. It's called the kichlal yidei davar acher, taking it with using holding some scarf around your hand, or the holding the lulav. The first case was holding the lulav where they put the rings around the lulav. Can you hold it there? Is that called a chatzitza? And so these were discussions between Rabbah and Rava. And then there came out also an issue, similar issues of if you stuff um, into the rings, you stuff in the lulav, you're going to cause the leaves of the hadassim and aravais to fall off, and then those loose leaves will be considered maybe a chatzitza, and that's what Rabbah said. Rabbah says it's min b'minoi. It's something in the two types of things. They don't. It's not called a chatzitza. It's not called a separation because it's the same item. And then we had, if you wanted to cut off the length of your lulav, don't cut it off because meshtairi hutza, they're going to be leaves that are going to end up staying in that bundle that are not really attached to the lulav. They're detached from the lulav because you snipped it on the bottom where those leaves were attached initially. But now that you snipped it, they're detached from the spine of the lulav. And what's going to happen is it's going to be a chatzitza. Again, the same idea that it's separating between the species. And Rava says min b'minai. Again, he uses his opinion that min b'minai is not chaytzitz when you have two of the same species, so it's not considered a chatzitza. So, for example, in this scenario where you have the lulav branches, the lulav leaves separating between the hadassim, and the lulav, and the aravais, and the lulav leaves are there, that's not called a chatzitza. It's not a problem. It's called min b'minoi, einay chaytzitz. So it's the same species. It's not a problem. Then we talked about smelling the hadas, and smelling the esrog. And we said, the Rabbah said that that the hadas is a bigger problem than the esrog when it comes to smelling it on Sukkot. Why? Because the main benefit that someone would benefit from a hadas, from a myrtle, is smell, and you're not allowed to benefit from it because it's huksa mitzvasa. They become separated for the mitzvah, and as we saw now in Shulchan Aruch, that separation seems to affect the entire days of Sukkot, and even if there's a Shabbos that comes after Sukkot, it seems to continue and extend till after Shabbos. And so that's with a hadas of a mitzvah, and it's prohibited to benefit from it. And what's the benefit of a hadas of a myrtle? It's smelling. So on Sukkot, you can't smell it. You use it for the mitzvah. You can't get the regular benefit. What about an esrog? Could you smell an esrog? On that, the Gemara says, Rabbah says that's permitted. And he says because when you like initially set it aside for the mitzvah, you're not really excluding it from smell. You're excluding it from eating it because that's what it's used for. And you're saying, no, I'm using it for a mitzvah. So you're aktsiya, you're muktzah, you're makatza it. You're separating, setting it aside from by an esrog, you're separating it aside from eating it, but not from smelling it because that's not what it's normally used for. And therefore, it wouldn't be a problem to smell on Sukkot. But then, what about if they're attached to the ground? If the esrog is attached to the tree and the hadas attached to its tree, and they're attached, of course, attached to the ground, so then you have a different problem, and that is that we're concerned that you might end up going and cutting it off, transgressing the laws of Shabbos and Yom Tov. So this would apply all year round. On any Shabbos, would you be allowed to walk by an esrog tree and smell it? Would you be allowed to walk by a myrtle tree and smell it? And on this, Rabbah said that esrog you can't. Why? So here, esrog is more strict than the hadas. Before we said on Sukkot, the hadas is more strict. But on regular Shabbos of the year, it turns out that the esrog is going to be more strict. And what would the reason be? Because we're afraid you're going to cut it off to eat. The hadas, all you're doing is smelling it. Smelling it, you don't need to cut it off. We're not afraid you're going to cut it off because for smelling, you could just bend over and smell it. Go next to it and smell it. But for esrog, if you want to eat it, you're going to end up transgressing the law of harvesting on Shabbos and koitzer, it's called. And that would be a biblical prohibition. Now, so therefore, we prohibit you from smelling it on Shabbos. But a hadas, you would be allowed to smell on Shabbos, on any Shabbos of the year. Again, we're not talking about Sukkot Shabbos. We're talking about any Shabbos of the year. Now, then the Gemara mentioned, I think actually, did we do this? Yeah, we mentioned, right, that Rabbah said that lulav you're supposed to take it in the right hand, and the esrog you're supposed to take in the left hand. And what was the reason? Because the lulav has much more mitzvahs, and therefore the right hand is more an honor. So you honor the three mitzvahs more, and the esrog is in the left hand. That is one mitzvah, and so therefore you should show a chashivos, an importance to the three mitzvahs. How do you show their chashivos, their significance, their importance? By holding them in the right hand, the more honorable hand. And we just saw in the Shevach HaMoyadim, which I just started with, this sefer that I brought it. He summarizes a lot of the opinions of the commentaries, and he makes it very easy. It's a very easy book to read, to follow the halachas instead of going through all the details of a Shulchan Aruch with different opinions. And so he just makes it very simple, tries to summarize it and simplify it. So he brings over there that if it's a lefty, the at least he from his summarizing and his you know his conclusion is that a lefty should really use his left hand to hold the lulav and his right hand to hold the esrog. And the reason would be is that for a lefty, his left hand is the more honorable hand. It shows more honor to the mitzvahs, to the three mitzvahs that are in his left hand, which is the lulav, the hadas, and the aravos. Now, when it gets to lefty and righty issues, there really is much more complicated than that, because many people who are lefties, they're not complete lefties. They do this with their left hand, they do that with their right hand, and it gets much more complicated than this. But on a very simple level, he writes that the lefty should use should be holding the lulav in his left hand. But it definitely is a machlekes. They bring down in commentaries over here, bring down that's machlekes rishonim, that the early commentaries debate about the lulav. Now, there is something very interesting here, and that is the question that the Magen Avraham asks on Shulchan Aruch. The Magen Avraham asks a question in Shulchan Aruch on this Gemara. He says, what's the reason? Why do you hold the lulav, the hadas, and the aravas in your right hand? Because it's three mitzvahs. He says, that's the reason? You made a bracha. Al netilas lulav. Anything you make a bracha on, you hold in the right hand. And we say the bracha on the lulav. So of course you got to hold it in the right hand. So the Magen Avraham has a innovative halacha that comes out of this. The way he says it, the way he explains this, comes out, he says, we must be talking about not only when you're saying the bracha on the lulav, but really whenever you take the lulav, you're supposed to have the lulav in your right hand and the esrog in your left hand. Not only for the bracha. And what does that mean? It means that when you're going and using the lulav during Hallel, you're shaking the lulav then. You're not saying the bracha on it then. So you might think then maybe it's fine. You don't need to, I said the bracha. I had the lulav in my right hand, the esrog in my left hand. I was yaitza. It says this is what Rav is talking about. That whenever you take the lulav, you take the lulav in your right hand, and you take the esrog in your left hand. Meaning, even during the wavings, that you're not saying a bracha. Yeah, when it's the bracha, of course you got to take the lulav in your right hand. The Gemara here is not talking about that. That's for sure. You got to take the lulav in your right hand. He says the bracha al netilas lulav. You say the bracha al netilas lulav, you got to hold the lulav in your right hand. But when it comes to the other types of the mitzvah, that when you're doing other mitzvahs with it without saying the bracha, that's when during the Hallel, when you wave it, when you're holding it, then also you got to do you have to hold it in the right hand. And that would be the reason. He says another point as well. He says you could also answer that why don't you also take the esrog in your right hand as well? Well, hold them all together in your right hand. And that's the Gemara's question. My taimo, why are you holding the esrog in the left hand? Hold that also in the right hand. And on this, the Gemara answers, and it's a little unclear from the Gemara what it means, but it says these are three mitzvahs, and that's one mitzvah. And what it means, the way the Magen Avraham is answering, is explaining the meaning of the Gemara, which is a little vague according to this question. That this is the question. What's the answer? Why don't you hold the esrog as well? Because this is 3 mitzvahs, that's 1 mitzvah. What does that mean? So he says, if you look in the pasuk, what does the pasuk say? Pre Eitz Adar, kapes tamarim, va'anaf eitz always v'arvei nachal. All the 3 have a vav connecting the 3. These are 3 mitzvahs. The first one is pre Eitz Adar without a vav connecting it to the next. So this is the 3 mitzvahs that are connected, and that's the 1 mitzvah to show that the pasuk separates them. That's why you hold the esrog in the left hand. So in other words, of course you have to hold the lulav in the right hand. You said a bracha on it. You're saying the bracha on tilas lulav, but the esrog should specifically be in the left hand because the pasuk separates it. The pasuk separates the esrog from the other 3. And so that would be a reason.
The pasuk puts the esrog first.
Okay. But it separates them, and you're saying a bracha on the lulav, you have to hold the lulav there. And the fact is that the esrog is meant to be separate.
When we say that, like when we're saying the order of the fruits of Eretz Israel, the order that it's mentioned in the pasuk is the one that comes first.
So that could be, I mean that's correct. I mean, but the fact that it says it first obviously means you're right, there is some type of significance to it. But at the same time, the fact that it separates it means that it's in this scenario regarding the holding it, you're not going to hold it in the same hand. You hold it in the other hand. In whatchamacallit, in Indian, in a certain spiritual meaning of the esrog does symbolize the greatest, symbolizes the holiest of the holy, the good smell and good taste. So it does symbolize this, importance. But at the same time, the lulav is what you're saying the bracha on, and therefore the lulav is together with the adasim and arabis, and that has to be in the right hand. I would also say that maybe, how does it work? Do you bring the esrog to the lulav, or do you bring the lulav to the esrog? When you're putting them together, is it the lulav is here and the esrog is separated and you bring it? So it could be symbolic of the uniting that the esrog needs to do to the other 3 types of yidden. That the esrog has to make sure to go bend over and feel maybe uncomfortable and connect with the other yidden. In other words, it could be that's the union, that it's you're higher, you're first, but at the same time you got to get closer, try to connect to the other yidden. Don't keep yourself too high. So maybe that's why it's first. In a certain sense, he's greater. At the same time, he's got to connect to the other yidden. Anyway, just a little thought.
But the 3 are more than the 1, no?
3 are more than the 1. So that's the simple way of reading the Gemara. That the Gemara is specifically saying that point, that because it's 3 is more than 1, that's why you should hold the lulav in your right hand. The problem is that we don't need that reason, because you need to hold the lulav in the right hand because the bracha is on the lulav. It's al natilas lulav. So then what do you care if it's 3 mitzvahs or 10 mitzvahs or 100 mitzvahs? It's the brachas al natilas lulav. You have to hold the lulav in the right hand. So that's why he has 2 answers. One answer is that the Gemara's question was, why is the esrog in the left hand? It's not why the lulav is in the right hand. The lulav has to be in the right hand. But why is the esrog in the left hand? On that, he says, you know why? Because the pasuk separates it from the others. This is 3 mitzvahs together with vav, connecting them. And that's the meaning. So it doesn't mean because it's 3 mitzvahs versus 1 mitzvah. It means this connects all the 3 mitzvahs. And it separates that 1 mitzvah, it's separated. That 1 mitzvah is separated. That's one way. The other way he's learning is that besides for when you say the bracha, there's also an obligation to, when you use the lulav and esrog, to hold the lulav in your right hand even during Hallow.
Want to know
You're not
what's
saying a
wrong.
bracha now. Why? Why would you say the bracha? Why would you hold the lulav in the right hand during Hallel? I'm not saying a bracha. I don't need to hold the lulav in my right. When I say the bracha, the lulav, I have to hold it in my right hand. But during Hallel, do I have to hold it in my right hand? Zok the Magen Avraham. Here comes the Magen Avraham, and he says, yes, that's what Rabba's statement is. When you say the bracha, of course you got to hold it in your right hand. But you know what? Even during Hallel, you got to hold it in your right hand, because, and this is where the understanding that you said, it's tlasa mitzvahs. This is 3 mitzvahs. That's 1 mitzvah. So therefore, you should hold it in your right hand. Yes, Ezra.
The small bills for the maid.
If we're talking about an individual, a normal individual's hand, and if you're talking about an etrog that's, mehudag, you can't hold all 4 of them in one hand, because the etrog is liable to slip out. So I think that from a practical standpoint, it requires both hands, and it requires the etrog to be put in the other hand if you have to have the shalosh minim in one hand, then the other one has to be in the other hand. That's number one. Number two, I think the reason why, right, we always defer to the right, because I think that's the way, that's God's strength is in the right side, as opposed to the left side. And I think that's the reason why we hold the lulav in that hand. If I'm not mistaken. I had this conversation long ago with someone. I said that's what we should be. That the right hand is the power side of Hashem versus the left side, and of course he said, prove it.
I don't know if you could word it that way, and I'll tell you why. Generally, when you talk about gvura, strength, that really is generally the left side. The left side is gvura. The right side is chesed. So to word it that way, that the strength of Hashem is on the right side, that doesn't it doesn't really fit with the common the common understanding that the right side symbolizes kindness and the left side symbolizes severity and strictness and strength. So generally we understand that the right side is more honorable. It's more because we want to emphasize kindness over strictness. I think that's maybe the connection. Again, it's a little above my pay grade, but it's getting into Kabbalistic ideas of the right side and the. But I know in Hasidic garments they specifically try to have the right side, like on a jacket, the way you fasten it. So in Hasidic garments like a kapata or a bekisha, they put the right side to be almost similar to the way women's clothing is, that the shirt, the right side goes over the left. The buttons are, by a woman's shirt, the buttons are on the left side, and the right side goes over it and has the holes. And so by a Hasidic garment, that's the way it's meant to. That's the way it is. And specifically because we want to bring kindness overriding overwhelming the severity. But in general, and it's brought in the law. It's brought in even Kiyah Shofar. It's brought in Hasidic writings there about blowing the shofar is the concept of gvura, of strength. But it's not to. It's not that we're emphasizing the strength on its own. We want the kindness to have the power of the left side of the gvura. And that's the blowing the shofar is like this blast of gvura that the gvuras geshamim, like the strength of referring to Hashem's strength, but it should come into like and the blessings should come with strength, like we utilize the strength of Hashem in a way of blessing. But in any event, the right side is somehow considered more honorable, and I guess on a very practical level, it's just because your right side is what you normally do everything with. So I guess that would be the you're more capable with that hand, with that side. That would be more honor. Kol hapinais shata poina. It says every time you turn in the Beis Hamikdash, you're supposed to be poina to the yamin, to the right side. So if to make a left, you go to the right, and then you ultimately get to the left. It seems to the right side somehow has an element of that we try to emphasize the right. So again, I think it's connected to kindness. Chesed is connected to the right side, and it's sort of like it draws down kindness from Hashem.
Rebbe?
In fact, when we break the matzah, the middle matzah, that's all about breaking the severity. It says there's hey gevurais, there's 5 levels of severity. So when we break that middle matzah, the middle matzah symbolizes Levi, it symbolizes Yitzchok, who's severity. Yitzchok was Avram is Chesed, Yitzchok is Gvura, severity. So we break the severity, and we then take the at least there's a custom to take the after you break it into 5 pieces. The big afikoman, the big piece for the afikoman, you actually break it into 5 pieces, which symbolizes the 5 the hey gevurais, the 5 gevurais that we're trying to sweeten. We're trying to sweeten the gevurais, so the severities. Anyway, but bottom line is that the right hand always takes precedence. We'll have to see if we find anything written about it over here, any more in the commentaries. Yeah, Moshe, did you want to say something, or? Okay, guess not.
Rebbe? No, I did.
Oh yes, Isaac.
Hi. But also, and I forget where I saw this, it's an issue always of whether this is you doing something else to somebody else, or whether it's something you're working on your inside. And that's always a very key. Is it outwards or inwards? Chesed, we feel, is outwards. You do chesed to somebody else. The gevura that we're talking about, if it's mostly inside, you're withholding yourself from doing something, whether it's your taiva or whether it's whatever it is.
Right.
So you try to apply it that way. If the gevura going out is not necessarily a good midah.
Right. Right. Definitely. Yeah, you got to. So it's got to be calculated which direction it's going. It's
Right.
in, right. And right, for sure. Okay. All right. Good point. So here we have the laws of a righty or a lefty in regard to shaking lulav. And now the Gemara says, why do you say the bracha on the lulav? And that's where we're up to. Amar Reb Yirmiyah Reb Zrika. So we're going to start here. We're right before the Mishnah. We're on page 37b. 37b, and we're let's see. It must be about 20 lines from the top of the page. I would say maybe 21, 22 lines from the top of the page. At 37b, right before the Mishnah, it's Amar Le Reb Yirmiyah the Reb Zrika. Reb Yirmiyah said to Reb Zrika. David, what page do you have it on your Gemara? If you're just like to announce the Steinsaltz page.
Let me look it up 1 second.
The Koran. In the Koran edition.
Yeah. 184.
184. Page 184.
185.
In the Koran,
Yeah.
185? In the Koran
Yeah,
edition.
You're right before the Mishnah, right?
Right before the Mishnah, yes.
Yeah, 185.
185. Okay. So, Amar le Reb Yirmiyah le Reb Zrika, ma tam le mavarchinon ella al netilas lulav. What is the reason that we only say the bracha on the lulav, and we don't mention the other species that are part of it. What would be the reason? So the Gemara says, Hoyel v'gavoya mikulan, because the lulav is higher than all the others, and it basically takes on that, the bracha, gets the bracha because it's more chashuv, it's bigger, it's more significant. So because it's bigger, the entire package is called by that name. Therefore, we give it that. This is the way Rashi explains it. Choshevu b'nikra ha'eged al shemai. Rashi says it's choshev, it's significant, and the package, the bind, the thing that's bound together is called the lulav. So therefore, you say the bracha on it. So the Gemara says, really, it's bigger. V'lag behei la'esrog v'levarei. So why don't you just lift up the esrog, and the esrog will be bigger. You could say the bracha on the esrog. And Rashi over here says that the Gemara is thinking, since it's bigger, it refers to the fact that the lulav is higher than the hadassim and aravis. The lulav, the spine of the lulav is higher than the. That's what the Gemara thinks it means. That's gavaya mikulan, since it's higher than the others. Therefore, you make a bracha. So the Gemara says, but the esrog you could even make even higher than that. Why don't you make the esrog even? You could put the esrog go all the way on the top. And the Gemara says, Amar lei. So he answered. Reb Zrika answered Reb Yirmiyah back. He says, Hoyel uvaminoi gavaya mikulan. That since its species is higher than all of them, therefore it's not because the lulav it goes above, that it extends above the and it reaches a higher place, but because its species is higher than the others, or it's taller than the others, therefore it gets the bracha. So it's not because what's actually higher right now, but it's what is what is essentially taller. There is an understanding that it means the tree, that the tree is higher than the other types of trees. That's another way of understanding the answer that the Gemara gives.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
there's a note here in the Steinsaltz. It's from Rabbi Shmuel Shmelki of Talbus. He says some add a rationale for this suggestion. It says let him lift the esrog. Since the esrog is the first of the species listed in the pasuk, it stands to reason that the blessing would be recited over the esrog, which is what I was saying before.
Right. That the fact that it's mentioned first, maybe that would be, in other words, like the question is not so much on the other species. The question is really more on the esrog. In other words, the way I translated the question is, why don't you say a bracha on all of them? The way you're translating the question is, why the lulav versus the esrog, which is first? And on that, it says, well, it's the question is more about the lulav versus the esrog. Okay, that's a nice that's a nice shot. Okay, and then the back and forth is all just regarding the lulav versus the esrog. Very good. We are up to the next Mishnah.
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Yes.
I just want to mention, I heard one time that the lulav is really like a keter over the tree itself. The way it stands up, it's like a keter.
Right. Right. Okay, that's an interesting point. Maybe that was the meaning, the Gemara, but I'm not really sure what Where is it like a kesser? In what sense? It looks that way. It looks like a crown. The stem on the bottom looks like a crown, or the pitum looks like a
The
crown.
way
What do you mean?
the way it stands up, the way it stands up in the tree, at the top.
The way it grows from the beginning of the growth, or when it's more
I
mature?
don't know. It's what
Uh-huh.
it's what I heard in a shiur. That's why I'm asking, because this is what was mentioned in the class.
Maybe
Right.
when it's held, it's standing straight like a king.
Okay, we are going to continue with the next Mishnah. Okay, 37b, the Mishnah, it's right in the middle of the page. And where would they shake, at what point during Hallel would they shake the lulav and the other species? And the Gemara, the Mishnah says, "B'haidu Lashem tchila v'soif," by the beginning Haidu Lashem pasuk, and by the end Haidu Lashem pasuk. In chapter 118 of Tehillim, there's a pasuk in the beginning of that chapter and a pasuk in the end of the chapter that both mention, that both say Haidu Lashem ki tov. So both of those is where you would shake. Uva Ana Hashem Haishiana, and also by Ana Hashem Haishiana, please Hashem save us. That would also be a place to Beis Hillel. That's the opinion of Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai Yamim, and Beis Shammai says, Ana Hashem Hatzlichana. Beis Shammai holds even by Ana Hashem Hatzlichana, which is the pasuk right after Ana Hashem Haishiana. And so that's basically the four places, or I guess three places you would say, and according to Beis Shammai, four, that you would shake it. Of course, it's still a little vague. When you say Haidu Lashem Ki Tov, we say it numerous times. Haidu Lashem Ki Tov, we repeat it, and the Haidu Lashem Ki Tov, Kili Elam Chasta, Yemina Yisrael Kili Elam Chasta, Yemina Beisarin Kili Elam Chasta, Yemina Yuri Hashem Kili Elam Chasta. We say like a number of psukim there, and it is interesting when you go to shul, you see a lot of people are a little unsure. Am I supposed to be shaking at this here also? But the Mishnah here says, and maybe we'll see in the Gemara, but the Mishnah here says that's Hoidul Hashem Ki Tov, the beginning, Hoidul Hashem Ki Tov at the end, and Ana Hashem Hashiana. And again, Ana Hashem Hashiana is doubled, and we say it twice. So does that mean you'd shake it at both? Okay, we'll see. Now, Amar Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva says, Soife Hayisi, I saw the Rabbi Gamliel of Rabbi Yeshua, by Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. The whole nation would shake their lulav by it leaves it. It's they would all be shaking their lulav. And they wouldn't shake it. Now, what does that mean? They would shake it, and the rabbis didn't shake it, but the people shook it, and the rabbis, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Yeshua, they didn't shake it. Ella b'Ana Hashem Haishiana, only by Ana Hashem Haishiana. So how do you translate that? I saw that the people would all shake it, but the rabbis only shook it by Ana Hashem Haishiana. So the understanding is that the question of what Rabbi Akiva is trying to prove is the question of, do you shake it by Ana Hashem Hatzlichana? And on this, he says, I saw that everyone else was shaking it, and they, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Yeshua, they didn't shake it only by Ana Hashem Haishiana, not by Ana Hashem Hatzlichana. But it's not excluding the Hoidul Hashem Ki Tov shaking. Those also didn't shake. But regarding the Ana Hashem Hatzlichana, that a lot of people were shaking it. Everyone in shul was shaking it. Kol ha'am, naninus lulaveim, they would shake the lulav. But the rabbis, they knew that they knew something that everyone else didn't know. That Beis Hillel holds you don't shake it by that. That you only shake it by Ana Hashem Haishiana. The Gemara says Nianua Man dechar shmei. Where did we get to this shaking part? That you have to first. You should say you have to shake it. It should mention about shaking it, and then we'll talk about where. Our Mishnah just jumps into where you shake the lulav. Who says that you have to shake it? So the Gemara answers that Hasam Koy, it's going on another Mishnah. There was a Mishnah a few pages back, and it said over there, Kol lulav sheyesh by shloisha tvachim, kedei lenaneh by. That it says over there, every lulav that has three tvachim, and the way we translated it there, the Gemara translated it that it should say ukadei and enough to shake it, which means 4 tvachim. So we mentioned over there already about shaking it. So once we mentioned there about shaking it, it makes sense to now be able to jump right in and say, where do you shake it? What places during the davening do you shake it? So once we said over there that you'd shake it, and so it was mentioned. Don't think that we're just starting this discussion without preparing you. You already knew about shaking it because we spoke about the size of the lulav, that it has to be 3 tvachim and an extra tefa, and therefore, and if it has 4 tvachim, it's kosher. The ka'amar, so that's why our Mishnah comes after that Mishnah, and it says heichan menanim, where, but what places do you shake it? Yes, Ezra.
So why didn't they ask the question at the point where they were discussing the size of the lulav? Where from does
who says you need to shake it? So the answer to that, I think, is that we weren't actually coming to tell you any halachas about shaking it. We were just trying to be nice and explain why do you need 4 tvachim and everything else needs 3. So it was mentioned there on the side. That wasn't the main source, the main place that it's teaching them. It's coming to teach you that. But once it said it, it actually does teach it to you as a side point that you need an extra tefach for the shaking. And once we already know about the shaking, it does make sense for us to be able to jump right into it. But
you're still not giving me a source. What you're giving me is circular logic. You're saying A points to B and B points to A and A points to B without telling me what was the original
source, right? So the Gemara's question wasn't really who says that you have to shake it. It's more who is talking about shaking it. That's really the Gemara's question. Who's talking about shaking the lulav? You're just jumping in. Where did we, where did this come into the conversation? We're talking about the lulavs, we're talking about, all the different things that are acceptable, and different problems, blemishes.
In the Tilas lulav, we were talking about how do you have to hold it when you take.
Yeah, that's the Gemara.
Lulav. Right, but I'm saying,
but we're talking about the Mishnah.
Never brought up what you do with it. We said taking it together. We never said shake or dance, whatever. All of a sudden, we're introducing shaking.
Right. So if you're introducing a totally new concept, so it should say should start with saying you need to shake it, and then talk about the shaking. That we're starting a new concept. Here, it doesn't really do that. Here, it just says, and where do you shake it? It sounds like we're not talking about shaking. Gemara's answer is no. We were talking about shaking. So if the Gemara's question was, how do we know that you have to shake it? Like, what's the original source? Then that would be that would be if that would be considered a good question, like who says you have to shake it? Why didn't the Mishnah tell us the source of it? But the Mishnahs don't always say the sources. So the Gemara's question seems to have been not what's the source of shaking it, but since when were we talking about shaking it? And on that, the Gemara says, yeah, we mentioned it earlier. So why earlier did we mention shaking it if we weren't talking about shaking it? And the answer is because then we weren't trying to talk about shaking it. We weren't discussing shaking it. We just were mentioning the size. It came up that it needs a little extra to be able to shake it. But once we mentioned it there, so it's not surprising for us to continue that conversation. So that's, I think, the answer to your question, Ezra.
Well, maybe maybe the reason why the rabbis didn't shake, the answer to the rabbis didn't shake except in Anna Hashem Oshiana, is because there was no particular source to say that you should shake it at all these other places.
So that would be good if they didn't shake it at all. But the fact that they shook it by Ana Hashem Shiana obviously means that Rabbi Akiva is just dealing with when to shake it, not if you should shake it. You know what I mean? They do shake it, and of course we know after the fact. Of course, hindsight is 2020. We know that you definitely have a mitzvah to shake it, but even coming from without knowing the practical side of it, and coming to Shul for 50 years, but just learning the Mishnah, you see that Rabbi Akiva was not dealing with if you shake it or not. It's more where do you shake it, or how often, how much do you shake it. But it's definitely they also agreed to shake it. And not only that, even though Rabbi Akiva doesn't say it, but the understanding is that they shook it as well by Hoidul Hashem. He's just dealing with shaking it like Beis Shammai says. Do you shake it by Yon Hashem Atzlichana or not? But for sure, they shook it Hoidu and they shook it by Yon Hashem Beishiana. And the only question was Yon Hashem Atzlichana. But if they wouldn't shake it, that would be a great shot. In other words, if Rabbi Akiva's statement was they didn't shake it at all, then I think your shot would be like, that would be great. Yeah, but what they're basically saying is, who says there's a mitzvah, right? Maybe there's no, maybe you don't do it. But because they shook it on Hashem Mashiach, that sort of messes up the option of learning it that way. Okay. What about in the Beis Hamikdash?
Did they shake it there?
Not only did they shake it,
did they just carry it around
the Mizbeach?
What does it say? The Sukkah. Well, we're gonna get into the story of the Beis Hamikdash soon. So when we get up to it, that's the other chapters. Maybe we'll see about the stories there.
Well, the reason why I'm asking all these questions is because the minhag Edot HaMizrach is very different and even with that, there are differences there versus the minhag of Ashkenaz. Because in my mahzor it says I have to shake it 6 times. And one time is when I make the bracha.
Right.
And one time is the first time you say Hodu, and that's it. You don't do it for anything else. And then you do it twice at Hoshiana, and twice at the second set of Hodu, and that's the 6. And that's the Keneged, and that's the total is 36 because you have to wave it 3 times each,
Right.
So therefore, and that's connected to 36 hidden
Tzaddikim. Lamed Vav Tzaddikim. Yeah. Interesting.
So that was the reason why
yeah.
You're bringing...
Right. Listen, it's good. We're discussing the waving and the shaking, so it's good. Definitely, it's definitely on target over here. We'll see, and then we'll see about the Beis Hamikdash soon. Yes, David.
Yeah, there's an interesting note here. It says the order that it's given in the mission is not typical. Here it says this is a statement of Beis Hillel, and then it says Beis Shammai says. Normally it says this is what Beis Shammai says, and Beis Hillel's afterwards.
Yeah.
So I don't want to read the whole note, but if you want, I can show it to you. You can look at it. You want to look at it?
Yeah, the only thing is we only have a few minutes. Maybe we'll talk about it tomorrow. If you want to text it to me, take a picture and text it to me. Can you do that, or email it?
I don't know if it works like that. Let me see. I don't know.
If you could just take a picture, no?
I'm not sure if it works if I can do that.
Take it and text it.
It's part of the program. Yeah, let me see.
Oh, I see. Oh, screenshot. Can you screenshot?
Maybe I can text it to you. I'll try to text it to you.
Or you could cut and paste. It's a PDF, so you can't. Can you cut and paste? Maybe you could cut and paste and then put it on my WhatsApp.
Yeah, I might be able to do that.
Oh, okay. All right. Very good. So let's go a little further. So the Gemara said that we have a earlier Mishnah that mentioned this, And so now comes this Mishnah and talks about the shaking, the wavings, the shaking. Now comes the next Gemara. The Gemara says that Tanan Hasam, Shtei Alechem Ushnei Kivsei Atzeres, that there's a Mishnah that we learned over there in Menachos, that there's the two breads and the two kvasim of Atzeres, the two sheep. In both of these, there's a mitzvah to wave. You wave them. It uses a different term, not niyanua, but it's similar. They need tenufa and teruma. And so the Mishnah over there says these need tenufa, the two breads, and the two kvasim. What does this refer to? On Shavuos, they would have like a special carbon. In fact, I believe it's the only shalmei tzimur, the only communal shlamim, normally, which is considered a carbon. It's considered kachei kachim. Interesting love. Normally, a shlamim, a peace offering, is normally kachim kalim. But anyway, there, Shavuos was a special day. And they would wave this special sacrifice, the two kvasim, these two sheep, two lambs, and they would also, in connection with it, they would have two breads of Shavuos. It was like a unique type of ritual because it was not done on other holidays.
Also, so I think that was the only chametz that was introduced.
Right, it wasn't brought as a
dish. The shtei lechem was the only time that you ever had chametz around the mizbeach.
Possibly, yeah.
I believe.
Almost all the menachos were not, but I'm just trying to think.
No, all the menachos were all matzah.
All matzah. But I'm trying to think if the carbon, I think Toida had 40 lechem chametz. Toida, carbon toida. So that's not so.
Oh, so maybe those were them. Then maybe not this. I'm sorry.
No, this is. No, it's both.
Oh, okay.
It's both because this was the first time that they brought from the new wheat as a carbon, and it was lechem. It was shtei halechem that was chametz, right? It's connected to Pesach that we didn't have any chametz at all, and finally here after the weeks. After Pesach, yeah, l'chayra, it's both of those. Both of those are okay. So basically it says Ketzad Huwaisa. How would the kohen do this? So it says Meniach shtei halechem al gabi shnei kvasim. He would place the two breads on top of the two kvasim, the two lambs. Umeniach yodei tachteim. Put his hand under the lambs. Umenif, and he would wave it. Umaylech. And he would bring them away from him, maybe and bring them back to him. So he would wave it by pushing them away and bringing them back, holding them in his hand. Shenemar, and I'm sorry, Maila umayrid, and he would lift them up and lower them down. Shenemar, as it says, asher hunaf va'asher huram. It says these items that were hunaf, they were waved, and huram, they were lifted. So the waved means they would be go to
outwards,
and fro, and they would go forward and backward.
Outwards from your body, right?
Would be lifted up and down. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, that the reason of doing this is to move it forward is to show Misha Arba Ruchais Shaloi, the forward and backward, to show that Hashem owns the Misha Arba Ruchais Shaloi, to Hashem who all four directions are his. Maila Umayrid would be lifted up and go down. Lemisha Shamayim Ba'aretz Shaloi, showing that Hashem made the heavens and the earth, that the heavens and the earth belong to Hashem. Okay, we're going to stop here. Sei gesund, everyone.
Hold on one second. I have a quick word from the Belzer Rebbe.
Yeah.
This is from the third, from the, whatchamacallit, what was his name? He wrote all these Sfarim that just translated. But okay, the question was his grandfather was the first Rebbe, and he came out and said this year we all have to really focus on the meaning and everything on Ana Hashem. And immediately the Hasidim started arguing afterwards. Did he talk about Ana Hashem Hashiana or Ana Hashem Haslichana? Half the Hasidim are saying it's Ana Hashem Hashiana. The other ones is going Haslichana. And they're arguing and arguing. And I forget his name, my head.
Okay.
He
Yes,
wrote,
whatever.
he's quoted often.
Reb Tsar Shalom Bells.
No,
Sar Shalom. Yeah.
no, next, go down through the
I
third
don't know.
one.
From Yeshua?
No, they have all these Sfarim by him. I just don't have a safer. I'm sitting in the kitchen. Okay. So he's 8 years old as a kid, and he said, no, 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 no. And they all looked at him. He said, Sadie was talking about Ana Hashem ki ani avdecha.
Uh-huh.
That's what's said earlier, right? So he said you focus on the Ana. Is that Ana with an aleph or Ana with a hey? The Ana Hashem Mashiach and Atzlichana are both with a hey. But earlier in the paragraph, we say Ana Hashem ki ani avdecha. And that's what he said. Mezeda was focusing on, that we should be really focusing on the meaning. That's all.
Shkoya. Very nice. Very nice. Okay. Okay. Zygons,
Kol
everyone.
tov. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.